name's James Vitale. I'm Head of Political Economy at Policy Exchange, and today we are considering practical solutions to the housing crisis. We have an august panel to debate and discuss the topic at hand. Rachel Maclean, to my right, is Minister of State for Housing and Planning and is the MP for Redditch. Richard Cook is Group Director of Development at Clarion Housing Group, the UK's largest housing association. Asia Cuthbert, to my left, is Councillor and Portfolio Holder for Sustainability, Green Services and Open Space at Bromley Council, and she's also Chair of the National Housing Federation's Communications and Influencing Group. Ben Everett, over to my right, is MP for Milton Keynes North. He is Chair of the APPG on the housing market and housing delivery, and he is a member of the Levelling Up Housing and Communities Select Committee. And finally, Ike Jaya is from my parish. He is Head of Housing Architecture and Urban Space at Policy Exchange. Thank you all very much for joining us. So what we want to do with this particular panel is try to consider, assess, debate those concrete, specific interventions that could be made to address the UK's housing shortage in the short to medium term, perhaps in the next 18 months. My plan is to be relatively anonymous throughout the next hour, but I thought I would just give the order of battle and say a few things about the way Policy Exchange has been thinking about this particular policy area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let each of the panelists have 5 minutes tops, very generous of me, and I will be strict on time so we can get through all the speakers, to set out the key interventions they would like to see made. Then we'll have a bit of a debate amongst us as a panel, and then I'll try and throw open to questions from the audience as quickly as possible. There is no question off the table, no question too outrageous. We only request that you give your name and your affiliation before making the question. So to that end, 3 points I just want to kick off with about Policy Exchange's take on the housing crisis. There are, of course, many things that can be said, but I'll try and just keep it to 3. The first thing I want to say is, at Policy Exchange, we see the housing market, the housing sector, and its challenges not simply as a policy problem, but as a political problem too. And what I mean by that is, obviously, housing is an immensely saturated policy area. There's lots and lots of clever people working on it, and there are lots and lots of clever ideas kicking around in the public debate. The key is, how do you get around the trade-offs, the compromises that need to be made to deliver change, but also how can we take communities with us so that we get local buy-in? The second point I want to make, and this has kind of been a house argument for Policy Exchange for some time, is that quantity and quality are not mutually exclusive objectives. And what I mean by that is, we see delivering more homes and delivering better homes as complementary. And we've been very vocal in getting the Building Beautiful agenda into government discussions, and I'm sure we'll be speaking about that in due course. And the final thing I would like to say, just before we kick off, is that planning reform is going to be necessary to tackling the housing crisis. That doesn't mean we need to necessarily start from a blank slate. It does mean we need to find ways to reduce discretion, and give greater certainty to communities, local authorities, and indeed developers. So without any further ado, I'd like to pass over to Ben to kick us off. 5 minutes for you, sir.
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Excellent, thank you. Well, I love going first. That's, the good news is I get to say everything first. The bad news is I don't get to agree with anybody, but I'm sure I'll find ways of agreeing with people when we come to questions. So I'm Ben, I'm the MP for Milton Keynes North. Milton Keynes it's a new town. In fact, it's a new city now. We're a city. It's so new, we're still building it. We're in the process of making Milton Keynes into a big urban city, and we have all of the challenges and opportunities that faces. Not least regeneration. Some parts of Milton Keynes are coming up for 55 years old and genuinely need knocking down and building again. But we've learned a lot of lessons along the way, and I've brought a lot of that into my work as chairman of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Housing Market and Housing Delivery. Broadly, the policy challenge that we have is, and I'll be blunt, it's building some more houses. But it's the right houses in the right place at the right time to the right quality point. And that's where we really struggle, because what we refer to as a market, as the housing market, just isn't. It doesn't operate in the way that you would imagine a traditional market to operate, with kind of demand and supply interacting to produce quality, affordable outcomes for people that want to spend some money. That is no way to describe what we call the housing market right now. So how did we get here, and how do we get out of this mess? Well, firstly, it's nobody in particular's fault. We've got decades and decades of government interventions, of governments of all colours, that have tried to fix the housing market. And those interventions have broadly had some kind of policy outcome that could be desirable, but the main effect has been to make it more complicated, to basically jam up the market even more. And so we're in one of those we wouldn't start from here type situations. But I think we need to step back, and even as Conservatives say, if we broke it, we fix it. We've played, as government of all colours, we've played a part in breaking this market. So we do have a responsibility to step in and fix it. The majority of the interventions over the last few decades have been demand side. And to be brutally honest, that's because they're the easiest ones to do. Supply side interventions are hard, they're expensive, they're time consuming, and they are politically contentious. Unfortunately, that's kind of what we've got to deal with now. All the easy stuff has been done. And if the answer was easy, we'd have done it by now. So supply-side interventions are where it's at. How do we do that? Well, a lot of people over the last 3 years have been saying, oh, can't we just take the politics out of planning? Can't we take the politics out of house building? I'd love to, but the answer is we can't. So we need to find a way of cutting through the NIMBY and YIMBY divide and talking to people about what they actually need, what communities need and what families need in order to have somewhere to live and to grow as a community and as a family. How am I doing for time, James?
That's 3 minutes.
Oh, boom.
Any jokes?
Oh, yeah, it's packed full of jokes right at the end. So we're... one of the things that I've realised as well is that we can do all the reform we like, supply side, demand side. It's not going to make a jot of difference if we can't deal with the elephant in the room, and that's the planning system. And it's not just making the planning system more simple, more engaging. It's about making it sexier. It's about getting better people into planning, more people, raising the esteem of planners. It's about giving them the powers that they should have. Because if you think about it, if you get up and go to work in the morning and you get to design a community that's going to last for hundreds of years, that is a very cool job. That is a sexy job. And we want people to be competing to be the chief planners of the future so they can have that impact on their societies, on their communities. If we get to that point, then all the other reforms that we need to do, access to finance for SME builders, access to land, funding for land, all of the minor issues that all need to be fixed in order to solve the logjam in the planning and building system, we can win. But without a functioning, desirable planning profession, we can't win. Now, I'm not talking planners down here, quite the opposite. They do a fantastic job under ridiculous pressurised circumstances, because at the moment, everybody is pushing into the middle, and it's the planners that find themselves in the middle. So we need to reform planning. And I would also bring back the proper rewards for planning authorities that get stuff built. Reboot New Homes Bonus. It's basically put New Homes Bonus on steroids. So when I was a councillor in a district council planning authority, the difference that we had between breaking even and writing one of those awkward letters to the Secretary of State was that new homes bonus. It was so critical, and that was in the southeast. So that it really makes a difference for local authorities. So I'd really turbocharge that. My last thing, levelling up. We've got a real opportunity with levelling up. We're spending billions of pounds on levelling up. Today's announcement, another £1 billion for left behind communities. We've got High Streets Fund, Levelling Up Fund, Towns Fund, Shared Prosperity Fund, funneling billions of pounds into communities that have been left behind, creating opportunities. And opportunities tangibly mean jobs, and jobs are for people, and people live in places. And what we don't want to do is spend all of this money creating all these opportunities, regenerating the economies, if we're just bussing people in to go and work there and then bus them out to go and live somewhere else. So we need to make sure that we're joining the dots between housing targets and the stimulated demand of government funding for levelling up into these communities so that we can make that prosperity, that opportunity, those levelling up funded dreams sustainable.
Fantastic, Ben. Thanks. What a great way to kick off. Asia, can I come to you next? Is that okay?
Yes,
Brilliant.
you may, James. Thank you so much for the introduction. So my name is Asia Cuthbert. I'm a councillor in Bromley, and I'm also a cabinet member. So not for housing, because I actually work in housing in my day job. So it's a bit of a conflict of interest. So the leader asked me to take on the amazing environment brief instead. Before I go on, I'm just going to say, because every time I speak at one of these events, people go, I didn't pay attention to what you were saying. I was always thinking about, where is she from? I'm actually Canadian, not American, so I'm from Vancouver. I've been here for 13 years, but the accent's not going away anytime soon. So there you go. There's the question in your mind answered. I'm just to give the panel a little bit more variety. I'm going to talk mainly from a local government perspective when it comes to housing, although I do work for a housing association, and I have done for the last decade. I'm going to talk more about the local government aspect, and I'm sure there's loads of councillors in the room that can probably attest to a lot of the issues that we're facing in Bromley. So Bromley is London's largest local authority, although if you ask people in Bromley, they would say they live in Kent, not London. And it's also where Clarion, the housing association that's sponsoring today, where they have the most amount of homes, the most amount of stock. So well done on stakeholder management. They're asking me to speak. So Bromley is very similar to a lot of local authorities across the country in that fact we sold off a lot of our housing stock in the 90s, and we sold it to Clarion, which is now Clarion. And that was fine for many, many years until probably about a decade or so ago, we started to really notice the amount of people coming in and needing temporary accommodation. Our housing waiting list just continued to get longer and longer. And it was not great on two aspects. Not great financially, because we had to house people in temporary accommodation, very, very expensive, but also not great for community cohesion, because a lot of our residents and families, we'd have to move outside of the borough. Not great. So we decided to take a big leap of faith about 5 years ago and reopen our HRA, the Housing Revenue Account, so we could actually build homes. And if you probably would have asked councillors about even 7 years ago if we would ever do that in Bromley, they would say, no way, because the market could do it better. But the market didn't provide housing. Our housing associations own all of our housing stock currently, and we were not seeing the void turnaround that we needed. And when we'd get new development, we just weren't seeing the Section 106 come through. So viability issues came, and we just did not see the number of kind of social housing we need. So we opened up our HRA, and we did it at a really good opportune time because Bromley is a London local authority, we have to go through the GLA to get any affordable homes grant. And at the time, a lot of London local authorities had not been able to deliver the number of homes they promised. So Bromley was in a great position. We just swooped in and took a lot of the grant. And we have committed to delivering about 1,000 homes in the next 5 years. So we've called it Bromley Homes for Bromley People. So that's kind of a snapshot of what Bromley is facing currently, and I think a lot of other local authorities across the country as well. But I think from my perspective, there's really two things the government ought to be focused on, because we know in the housing there's kind of two big issues when it comes to housing in this country. There's land supply and how expensive it is to buy, kind of do development, land-led development. And the second is, people's apprehension of agreeing to new homes in their communities, and you can completely understand why they'd feel like that. So to deal with the kind of the land supply issue, I think the government needs to take a little bit more of a focus on regeneration, and I think Ben's mentioned that. And I really was pleased when the government announced recently that Homes England would now start to fund regeneration projects with current social housing stock, because that was kind of holding a lot of housing associations and councils back. But I still think that that's a focus we could look at. So Homes England and the government could look at where is housing exasperated, because we often find, in major cities that there's a serious housing crisis, and they're pushing their homeless families out, and it's just creating this problem all across the country. So looking at where the acute shortage of housing is in the country, and then looking at how we can do big strategic regeneration developments that will create new homes and fix or regenerate the ones that are currently there. On the kind of getting people on side when it comes to housing, I mean, as a politician, I'm sure Rachel comes across this as our constituency, and Ben as well. When you go door knocking and there's a new development, people go, well, you better, speak out against that new development down the street, or you're not going to get my vote. I can barely get my kids in the school as it is. I can, barely fit onto public transport, and you completely understand these concerns. So I think, there's SIL, of course, and sometimes, in a community, that SIL payment from developers will be hundreds of thousands of pounds. But the community doesn't actually see that. I know that there's some neighborhood funding within SIL contributions, but, often people don't actually see what that SIL actually contributed to, or local councillors are so busy and it's officers who are overseeing those decisions, and they're spending the SIL in a school that's miles away. So I think, another thing that the government could potentially look at is making that SIL a lot more democratic, doing votes, having some sort of community-led SIL process, I think would help a lot. And I'm sorry, I went over. Apologies, James.
No, not at all. And I think we'd like to come back to SIL and the infrastructure levy reforms too in the discussion afterwards. I think it probably makes sense to go to you now, Richard. Is that all right?
Yeah, okay, that's great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Richard Crook, I'm Group Development Director for Clarion. I've had about 30 years in the industry, working in the private sector and now the charitable sector. Clarion's an organisation that's 125 years old now. We've been building homes for people in the most need for over 100 years of that, and created by William Sutton, who was our founder. Last year we built 2,000 new homes across the country. 78% of them were affordable. We are one of the largest shared ownership programmes in the country, if not the largest, which allows aspiring people to get on the housing ladder, and that's really, really important, and we recognise that, as well as building truly affordable social rent homes. Our business is focused on brownfield regeneration. That's our core business. Last year, 70% of what we did was on brownfield. And we do estate regeneration. We have one of the largest in the programme, which I'll come back to, the challenges around estate regeneration, which is great to hear, because we've all got those challenges, and I think there's solutions to it. And then we do large-scale garden communities, and we're proud to be leading on Colchester, where we're going to be building over 600 million of infrastructure. We're going to be building a university campus, creating 7,000 jobs and building 7,000 homes as well. But we don't build the homes without the three parts that come together. And I think that is incredibly important for our communities where we're going to build. And the wonderful thing about Colchester, which is a process that's gone on for over 10 years, we've got every political party involved in it, collaborating to deliver an outcome that is going to be the best for the people of Colchester, Tendring and Essex. And that's called real collaboration. And if you don't have the collaboration, it becomes incredibly political. And as much as I can sit here all day long wanting to take the politics out of planning, I know it's not going to happen. So how do we actually get everybody stood behind creating places for people? This housing crisis ain't going to go away. We acknowledge that, and everybody's been playing around the edges with it for many, many years, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. So we need fundamental change. We actually need a change of mindset, and the mindset needs to be thinking about the future. Housing is an infrastructure asset, okay? It's a home to personal people, but it's an asset for our country, and it should be regarded as that. And if you're building infrastructure, you've got to plan for it. It's not about the current term of office that we're in. Housing, the schemes we're involved in, generally are 10 to 15-year projects. Okay? And there's many election in that, local election, national election that comes through that. So for us to want to commit to invest last year over 700 million into building new homes, we need long-term policy decisions, not short-term decisions, but we've got to see policy. And when we see long-term decisions, we can plan for it. We're already building future homes. We're building the new future homes to sustainable standards. But we're planning for it. But actually, from government, we actually need to really understand what that new Future Homes legislation is going to be. And by the way, it's only 2 years away when we're actually supposed to be adopting it and starting it. Policy change is holding us back at present. We are advocates of building second staircases in tall buildings. But actually, when the consultation came out on the 23rd of December last year, which is a really good time, isn't it? I think we're all just broken up for Christmas. Here we are now, without actually any written policy about what actually the staircase is going to be. So we've currently got 3,000 homes stuck that we can't build. because actually we don't know what we're doing around second staircases. So we need that policy. When we know what the policy looks like, we know what the regulations state, we can get on and we can start building. I think I was reading a report last week, there's 150,000 homes in London actually stuck at present in the system, waiting for that legislation to come through. We can deal with the legislation if we know when it's coming and it comes in a timely manner. And I can keep reading lists around legislation that is forthcoming and has been announced, where we're waiting for the policy and the secondary legislation to flow through. In the meantime, everything stops, everything grinds to a halt. We got biodiversity net gain that we were already off and running on. We're already planning for it, yeah? But actually last week we turned around and said we're going to delay it again because we're not ready to implement it. And that's a worry for me. And then in London, we've got the new London Plan Guidance housing standards, which have just been introduced, which have specific targets that are best practice, okay? This is best practice asking us to build homes bigger than the national housing standards. So we have a national housing standard that actually everybody signed up to. And now actually local authorities are saying, oh, well, the best practice said I want it 10% bigger, so we now want it 10% bigger. Yeah. So it all gets very, very confusing. I could keep going. I've only got 5 minutes. Could probably spend an hour on it, yeah? But underlying all of this is skills and capacity. Because if we don't fix this, we lose the skills in our industry and we lose the capacity. Personally, my son's at university started this week. He's gone on a course for construction management at Newcastle. Okay, there's only 19 people on that course. It's frightening. 19 people doing a degree in construction, which is one of the most fantastic industries that you can get a job in. Okay, and they're all boys. They're all young men. There's no females on it. How bad is that? So you ask us, what do we need to do? We need to actually elevate the standard of our industry. Regeneration, I'll quickly kick on to. We've got one of the largest regeneration programs in the country. We're investing over 1.5 billion over the next 10 years in our existing homes. Okay, it's fantastic that this government and Homes England have announced the use of grant, finally, after years and years of lobbying, to be able to put some grant in the short term into our regeneration projects. We just hope now the GLA is able to actually do the same thing, because at present we can do that in London, outside of London, but we can't do it in London. And I think there's a bit of politics involved in that, and we need to unlock that, okay? But we need to do that. And then the other biggest challenge we've got with regeneration is the all right to buy. I think right to buy is fine, okay? But the problem we have is lots of right to buy purchase projects, units, with absentee landlords who just want to hold out for as much as they can possibly get. And what does that mean? That means I've got to go to the local authority, who we're working generally in partnership with around regeneration, and we've got to go through a 3-year compulsory purchase order to actually get these people to the table or be able to compensate, or actually even worse thing is get bailiffs in. We wouldn't want to go there, but that's the outcome. That means all these major regeneration projects, with people living in homes with damp and mould, okay, because it's out there, because our housing stock in this country, not ours, the whole country's housing stock is in a bad place, but we need to speed that process up. Then we can get people into new homes with low heating bills, better quality, better staff standards, better areas of place, better community cohesion. But we need to be able to act on that, so we need policy that can drive that as well.
Richard, I don't have a gavel, but I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up remarks.
Okay, so I'll finally wrap up then, and I'll use a great example, okay? And I could keep going with many of these, and I'll share them with you afterwards. Great example I was proud to be involved in. I was delivery director in London 2012 Olympic Village. And London 2012 galvanised this country into delivering an infrastructure project that we were proud of. And if you go there now and look at the place we've created, it is amazing. The communities we created, it is amazing. And the infrastructure we created. And what drove that? It was one focus, one dynamic goal across all the political parties, local authorities, planning. There was a development corporation that had one drive towards it. And the vision was simple, that everybody shared. Let's get it done. So if nothing else, incumbent on us all is we've got to build homes for the future, for our children and our children's children. And somehow we're going to see through this short-termism that currently is driving our housing and our planning policy. Okay.
So certainty, skills, capacity, and let's get it done is the call from Richard.
And another list of other things that I could share with you. But yes.
Ike, why don't you tell us how Building Beautiful fits into all of this?
Right. Right. Afternoon, everybody. Right, as we all know, and as we've heard, there are multiple solutions or multiple ideas about solving the housing crisis. I'm going to come up with just 3, which I think could work. Some of them have been referred to already. Now, I think, and it's been referred to already, we do need to reform the planning system. I know there's a lot of people who think the Town and Country Planning Act 1947 is probably the greatest policy era since, I don't know, dissolution of the monasteries or something like that. But I'm not in that camp. But we do have a planning system that, for whatever, I know planners work very hard. It's too slow, it's inefficient, it doesn't provide enough certainty, and it doesn't mitigate against risk. And we have to find a way of dealing with that, or we're not going to increase supply. Now, I think there's actually another thing to say about it. Another inefficiency of the plans. I'm an architect as well as working with Policy Exchange. Essentially, if any of you want a housing extension, you have to go through the same planning protocols as a developer building a 30-storey tower in centre of Manchester or centre of London. It's ridiculous. We have to find a way of making it more efficient. I think there's 2 ways in which we can very quickly reform planning. We have to find a way of breaking the discretionary principle. Every planning application is essentially reinventing the wheel. We have to find a way of making sure that everything's not just based on the discretion of quasi-judicial planning committee, but that we have rules in place or guidance in place that can occasionally give pre-approval if you comply with this set amount of rules, whether you call that a design code, street votes, something else Policy Exchange came up with. We have to find ways of breaking that discretionary principle in order to speed up the planning system. Second thing we need to do to reform planning is to democratise it. Now, I know we talk a lot about NIMBYs and YIMBYs. I mean, I find the term NIMBY quite unhelpful, to be honest, because I get it. It's frustrating when housing is held up, but we live in a democracy. I wouldn't want to live anywhere where people's right to object is removed. So the way you deal with NIMBYism isn't by demonising people depending on how they want to, whether they want to development or not. It's by making sure that they're involved in it, that they feel empowered by it, that they feel adequately consulted in the public consultation process, and obviously that they're getting a better quality product as well. Right, that's solution magic wand number 1. Magic wand number 2 is we need to build better quality housing. Obviously, Policy Exchange, we've been very invested in building beautiful. Beauty is a contested term for obvious reasons. If we asked everybody in this room, they'd have very different ideas of what is beautiful. And some people have had difficulty with beauty becoming a kind of political kind of paradigm because they quite rightly say, why should Michael Gove tell me what's beautiful, or why should the government insist that this is more beautiful than that? But it's really important. Introducing beauty, increasing quality is not about everybody agreeing about what beauty is, it's about everybody agreeing that beauty is important. And for long enough, we haven't done that. So we really have to invest in the quality of our housing. Yes, it can be subjective, but there are objective commonalities and observable truths that we all know apply to good housing. Public realm, landscaping, having streets facades that aren't too close together, space to see the sky, decent entrances which you can spot along a street. There are commonalities, there are principles we can apply to our design to make it better. The third and final thing I think we need to do, he says easily, is if we can do this overnight, we really need to build more council homes. I think we can't get away from the fact that as well as a supply issue, there's a clear affordability issue with housing as well. In London, the average house costs 12 times the average salary. Now, you would have to build thousands, millions of homes in order to square that circle. We have to acknowledge this affordability issue as well, and we have to ensure that we build housing for those on the lowest income, which is why it's encouraging to hear what Aisha talked about. Obviously, Clarion, I believe you're the biggest social housing provider in the country. It's a part of the market that's been neglected. In 1981, 31% of our total housing stock was council-owned. Now it's 13%. So we all know the political reasons for that, but we have to find a way of making sure that those on the lowest income have housing too. And this has a political, economic dimension as well. At the moment, the government spends £30 billion on housing benefit. That's expected to rise to £71 billion by 2050. You have a crazy system where the government is subsidising private landlords. Surely a more efficient way of using that public money would be actually building council homes, building a stock, a long-term investment whereby those on the lowest incomes could live, you increase supply, and you help with the crushing affordability issues that you do have with housing as well. And just finally as well, another good thing about building council homes, it would be a good way to ensure that beauty, many people think beauty is an elitist thing. They think of palaces and villas and things like that. Yeah, so they can be very beautiful, but you can get good quality stuff with buildings that aren't very expensive as well. The first housing estate in the world was built in this country, in East London. If you go there, it looks nothing like the housing estates you may think of, council housing estates you may think of from the 50s and from 60s and 70s. We have to find a way of building council homes, but removing the stigma of the mistakes we made in the past and make sure that the quality that we apply to these buildings is as good as we apply to other kinds of housing. And we have to also acknowledge, or accept, I think, that that's not an economic decision. It's very much a design decision about just making sure that these homes are treated as important as other kinds of housing from a design point of view, and that that doesn't necessarily have to cost more.
Thanks, Alex. Some fascinating ideas there. Spontaneous applause. Of course, the relationship between delivering new council housing and reducing our expenditure on housing benefit is something the Policy Exchange has picked up in recent research, particularly in a paper called Homes for Growth, which is not available in all good bookstores, but is online in PDF form. I'm going to hand over to the Minister to finish off this section of the event.
Thank you very much. You've given me the hardest job because there's definitely, I need more than 5 minutes to respond to all of that, let alone talk a bit about what we are doing. But I can see some familiar faces who were in my last talk, so I'm going to check you are all awake. I'm going to ask you a question. The number 15, what does that mean? Thank you. You were paying attention. So this is my elephant in the room. I have to get that out right from the start. But I am not the shortest serving housing minister. I'm now the longest serving since Kit Malthouse. So look, just take it and just carry on. So got that out of the way. So I'm also a Member of Parliament for Redditch, also in Newtown, like Ben. Ben and I have talked about this on multiple occasions. We also have a housing revenue account, and we're also driving that forward under the leadership of my fantastic council leader, Councillor Matt Dorm. I don't think he's in the room, but hopefully he'll catch up on this later. But let me just focus on, I think, 3 things, if I may, James. Okay. Everyone's talked about planning. We are reforming the planning system. We're doing that through the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill. That will be back in the Commons very soon after we come back from our conference jamborees. Hopefully that will get royal assent and that will bring much needed clarity. I know a lot of local areas have been waiting for that. But also it does more than that. It actually tackles some of the root causes of some of the delay that we've seen in the system. I think Ike talked about the discretionary nature of planning. We are going to take some of that out while still respecting local democracy. We want to simplify it, we want to modernise it, we want to make it much faster for local areas to do those local plans. That is what we are doing. Alongside that, there's some other key things that we are doing. Number one is the nutrients issue. We've got 100,000 houses with planning permission. We introduced very sensible measures in the House of Lords and Labour voted against it. We're going to bring that back and make sure we can allow those houses. A lot of them, by the way, are affordable housing. They're social housing. They're small sites in town centres and also communities across the country that are being held up. I want to talk also about beauty. I had also scribbled that down because I think it's such a key part of Michael Gove's vision, the whole Biden vision. Beauty is the first of it. And we have been working with a number of people, including Create Streets, and looking at the whole street votes idea. How do we bring that into communities so that they do feel that ownership and they can accept development because it's got that infrastructure that goes along with it. Okay, the next bucket is a pretty ambitious legislative reform. We have very ambitious plans to reform the leasehold system. If I was a gambling woman, I would be very happy to put a bet on that coming forward in the King's Speech. I do not know what's in the King's Speech, by the way, but I would very much like to see leasehold reform coming forward in that King's Speech. That will enable when people actually buy their own house, they think they're owning it, but they find out that they're a leaseholder much further down the line. They're subject to all these outrageous, extortionate costs. I think that's completely wrong, and we are going to change that. The other legislative reform is the Renters Reform Bill. We are balancing up the balance of power between renters and landlords. That's a very important reform. That's in line with our manifesto commitment to abolish that Section 21 no-fault eviction, which is a leading cause of homelessness, while also respecting landlords' legitimate right to hold property and not have bad tenants in it. I think the third thing it's really important to talk about here is the sort of demand and supply that I think Ben talked about right from the start. If this was easy, we could just get the Chancellor to write a massive cheque. Well, that's not easy in itself. But even if he did, that wouldn't actually solve the problem because we need to look at this system holistically. Any of you who followed Michael Gove's long-term speech plan for housing that he made back in July in King's Cross will have seen how he talked both about the supply side and also the demand side. Without a doubt, we need to put more stimulus into this industry. We need to help more first-time buyers and young people buy a house of their own. That is a core Conservative policy. That's something that I'm constantly making the case for. But we also need to do more for that diversification agenda. Now, I ran a small business for 30 years. I started it myself with my husband before I came into politics. I know how difficult that is to start a small business. So I am really very, very agitated by the plight of SME builders, small builders and self and custom builders who have had an absolutely torrid time of it. That's really number one reason why we need to fix this nutrients issue, because that's catching more of them than anybody else. But there's also a lot more we can do in terms of how the planning regime and how some of these onerous, I think, regulations, the way that the sill levy, for example, catches them even more than a large house builder, I think it's completely wrong. We're doing a lot of work on that to diversify this market, to enable more self and custom builders, more SME builders, and more community housing trusts and those land trusts to come forward as well. This is a whole sort of huge agenda, lots and lots of things, which I'm sure I've gone over oh no, I've got 7 seconds left. So I think we need to just, we talked about joining the dots a bit. We have to think about this as a holistic system. Yes, it stimulates the economy, but it also does demand considerable amounts of public investment from the Chancellor. I mean, I think our affordable housing programme costs something like £11.5 billion and counting. And obviously all the councils, they need the grant funding as well to deliver that. And at the same time, we have got very, very high demand on housing, just from our own population growth and also from immigration, illegal and legal. So all of these things are joining together, and they are all things that the government should be thinking about when we start to think about how do we get the right houses for everybody. And can I end with a joke?
Absolutely. Please.
Welsh Labour's housing policy.
We've got placards at the back.
Yeah, good.
You can't see them. Thank you very much,
Glad to get
Minister.
that in.
I'm going to be selfless, and I'm going to cut my bit down to make up for the time we've run over slightly, and then I'm going to open up to questions quickly. So can I ask for relatively clipped responses to my questions? But I'm going to start with a quote from an unlikely source, which is Jean-Claude Juncker. And he said that, politicians, we know what to do, we just don't know how to get re-elected afterwards. So if I can just pose this question to those who are seeking or have sought election, actually Asia raised the point, this is about concentrating the benefits of new house building because the costs and the disruption's quite concentrated too. And that particularly pertains to this question of the infrastructure levy and SIL. Let's maybe start with Asia. How can we concentrate those benefits more to take communities with us?
Gosh, I think if we can answer that question, we wouldn't have people objecting to housing. It's really, really difficult without actually doing the, beautiful homes. Because even if you got people to consult on the type of development and what it looked like, and said, we're gonna have £500,000 in development contributions, you'd still get people quite rightly concerned about new housing going up in their area. I think the way that we do that is by just gaining people's trust, because if you look at any of the big developments that have happened just use London as an example over the last 5 years, if you ask local people, have you seen community benefits because of this new housing development? And the answer will be no, absolutely not. And if you are canvassing in any of the by-elections, the many by-elections we've had in recent years, housing is always a topic. And I don't think it's because people don't want housing, because they have grandchildren, they have children. It's just that at this point in time, this moment, I don't want new housing because I can't get to work, I can't get a GP appointment, I can't, get on the RAM train. So people are looking rightly out for themselves at the moment. And I think the only way we can do that is by implementing some of the great suggestions that have been discussed today and some of the great suggestions that Policy Exchange have come through. But we just need that, that level of trust with the general public, because I don't think we've handled it. And I think it's probably more of a local authority issue than the government, but I don't think local authorities have been really good at handling community infrastructure levies or, developer contributions to the best that they actually could.
Can I just say, Minister, I'm very excited about some of the things you mentioned in your remarks. Very, very welcome. But that is a point that's come up with a lot of people from the sector, is concerns about SIL and the reforms to it. Ben, on the question that I raised, have you got anything to add to Aisha's points?
Yeah, absolutely. It's fundamentally, we have a system that's set up to fail in terms of engagement with communities. And I think back to my time as a councillor on a planning authority, and I'd hightail it back from London or Milton Keynes or wherever it was I was working, and I'd get changed and I'd rush off and head off to a parish council meeting, and you walk in the door and it's utterly packed, and you just go, oh, bugger, it's got to be planning. And it always was planning, and you think, oh, God, I've missed something. But by the time the community is enraged enough to rock up to the parish council meeting with their placards and pitchforks and whatever it is, you've lost. As a politician, you've lost. Basically, as a planner, you're thinking, oh, bloody hell, because the system's set up to be adversarial. Yeah. It's set up to make people argue. So if you haven't engaged the community and talked to them about what their needs are, what the benefits are of sustainable, affordable, proportionate development that's appropriate to the local vernacular and the needs of the community. If you haven't hit all those 4 principles, then you've lost. And there's no way back. And it goes all the way through the system, and you have a dust-up at every single part of the system until finally the Secretary of State decides yes or no. And normally it's the person with the deepest pockets that wins. That is the way that the system works. So engaging communities much earlier, digitising the engagement, and giving people a genuine say about what their needs are and how to meet those. And for me, the bit that gets that is proportionality. It is recognising that that you can't build mega developments without some serious consultation. But what you can quite easily get to 300,000 a year if you put a small amount of housing on each town, village and city. And by small, I mean proportionate. So if you've got a village of 100 houses and you have a chat with the folks that are likely to complain in that village, and you say, do you know what? I know down the road they've got their elderly parents living with them, and frankly your kids are still living with them, and one of them's 30 now. Do you reckon that of your 100 houses in your villages, we could take 10% more and make them genuinely affordable for local people, so that the likes of your parents don't have to come and live with you, and frankly your kids have got somewhere they can actually afford to live, and then communities stay together, families stay together. You cut down on all the other things like road journeys and all that. Do that proportionately across the whole country. It's very easy to get to 300,000.
That's very interesting. Rachel, can I ask you sort of a follow-up question on that? Ben's case is that we should be supporting the sort of gentle densification, the sort of organic growth of communities in small incremental ways. That doesn't seem to be the government's policy, at least for the short term. Of course, they've announced this big plans for the Cambridge new urban quarter. There's a general keenness to densify maybe a small number of cities rather than to promote incremental development across the country. Is that fair? Can you walk and chew gum at the same time, or have you committed to densifying our big urban areas beyond all else?
We can walk and chew gum and also build houses in cities and also in small areas, as Ben has said. And I think if you look at what we're really focusing on, I talked about the long-term plan for housing, and what we're talking there, Michael Gove set out how we want to accelerate development in London, Cambridge and Leeds specifically, followed by a number of other places. Why did we pick those areas? London, obviously, we have a mayor who's really not delivering what he needs to be compared to the scale of the pressures on housing from the cost and the affordability perspective, and the way he sort of added on a whole load of other things, and Richard alluded to this. It's just slowing down building in London. So we need to take action there. Cambridge, of course, we want that to be the life sciences capital of the country. It's got huge potential. That's why it's right for government to intervene and come together and fix the water problem, all the other things, and really grow that city to much greater extent, and obviously some of these other areas. But at the same time, we are also putting money into a system called neighbourhood planning and neighbourhood forums. They have the ability to come together, just as Ben has said, and we've made some funding available for that just the other month, to fund those groups who care passionately about their local area and do want to see a few houses at the edge of their town or village. And often you see that in the rural areas because you need those houses for the sort of agricultural businesses and people who live and work in the countryside. So yes, we're doing all of that. Can I just say one other thing, which is that on the planning, I mean, I really do agree with Aisha. I think Bromley Council's got a fantastic record, actually, for building, and your council leader is just really well known. Michael Gove's always talking about her as being really good. Is it Teresa O'Neill?
That's Bexley.
Oh, that's Bexley. I'm so sorry. Forgive me. Anyway, I'm sure yours is good as well. But, oh dear. Okay, so what we do know is where local areas do have a local plan in place, they do actually build 14% more houses. So it is so important that they do go through that process. I know it's really hard, and obviously what you often get is one set of councillors coming along saying, this is our local plan, then they get voted out, and you get some kind of rainbow coalition of, I don't know, kind of Newt-loving, you know, I don't know what, you know, Swift-loving people, and it just makes it very impossible to actually build anything. But if they can do that in a coherent fashion, it does mean that they are going to get those houses built with the community consent and dealing with that speculative development, which is the thing that erodes trust over the long period.
Great. Two more questions from me. Richard, I'm going to ask you a very blunt question, and you can give me an equally blunt response. In a sort of a tight fiscal environment, you've been calling for grant funding to increase, especially for regeneration. Given that there's not a lot of cash around at the moment for public spending, are there any things that can be done for free that would really help you and Clarion?
I don't know anything that comes to life for free, but if anybody does know, let me know. I think there's lots of things that can do, and interventionally wise and everything else. And the regeneration is coming out, actually the existing money. It's not new money, but it's actually using it wisely, because regeneration we can get on with, and that's what it's about. I think what is new enough free is we look at town centres, and our town centres are just too big everywhere. The town I live in the northeast of England, the town centre in Darlington is too big. And what we need to do is make those town centres smaller, and by bringing town centres smaller, we can actually regenerate, and we can actually put more homes into those town centres. That again, I'm back to compulsory purchase orders. Yeah, if you look at the ownership of our town centres, it's an average high street's probably got about 80 different owners in it. Okay, all with their own different agendas. Generally, these shops are actually, they're not even shops anymore, they're just vacant, but there's an opportunity to redevelop them. And I was actually down in the southwest last week in Plymouth with Plymouth City Council, who actually, who again politically have moved around quite a lot, as you all know, yeah, but actually are forward-thinking, working with Homes England, having a plan around what they want to do, and buying up land and talking to people like us who can develop. And we've got capability. We can work with any local authority in the country to deliver homes. And if we got access to land, we can fund it. So that's for free, because we'll fund it, yeah. We've got capability to do it. We've got over 300 professionals in the business. And we can actually operate or sell those homes, or actually build those homes and own them and build social rent, or any other tenure you want to do, okay. And that's what actually can happen out there. But what you do need is you need real leadership. And that actually leadership comes for free. So that's one thing that comes for free. And actually by driving a CPO process, and actually the other bit is using other people's money. And Plymouth have been very wise. They're using some of Homes England money, some of their money, and probably some of my money, yeah? But that unlocks town centre redevelopment, and that builds new homes, yeah? It's not easy, but bringing people together. So I say what is free is collaboration, okay? And the true belief in wanting to collaborate. You can have that from us for free, and probably you can have that from a lot of other people as well. Yeah. So actually, we did get some things for free there, didn't we? Okay.
Well done.
Yeah.
You could go again.
I can ask you my question on our own time over a
Okay,
bit,
no
so I'm going to open up to the audience now. If you could put up what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a cluster of questions, and I'll try and remember them, and we'll try and answer in three. So maybe we'll go, can we just do 1, 2, 3 here, please, if that's all right? Yeah. So the two ladies at the front and the chap in the glasses in the 2 rows behind. Name and organisation, please.
No worries. Janet Fisher, co-chair of the High Street Historic Action Zone for Chatham Intra. Given that we are talking about pitchforks by the time we meet communities, why are we not investing in cultural and creative means, and also in our community activists who already have a beautiful network of people locally instead of calling people to parish council meetings at 11 a.m. when they're busy working. And that should include as well small businesses. The most effective activist in our zone is actually the owner of the Mexican Dive Bar, who's been able to get more responses to planning, and actually positive responses to planning, than anyone else in the area. So can we, some information as to why we're not actually investing properly in community engagement, because it really isn't rocket science.
Good question. Just here, please.
Hi, there is Alexa Phillips from The Telegraph.
Brilliant.
So there is growing support among some MPs for having council tax rebates for people who do build more homes in their areas. I just wonder what the panelists' view is on those calls, and whether I know there's financial pressures, but perhaps direct compensation is a way forward. What do you think about that?
Great. Just behind you. Thank you.
Hi there, Anthony Dimitriou. Really, I'm just here myself, but I work for a construction company as well. I do deliveries. In the trade, there is this idea that there's a triangle. Just like with fire, you need there's one of three things, but it's not what you need, it's what you sacrifice. It's either you get it cheap, fast, or good quality. You could only choose two. And I want to ask the panel, what do you think is actually necessary in a housing crisis? Because you can only have two, but not all three.
Ike, can you start with that? And I wonder if you might challenge the premise.
Well, I would say, obviously, I think quality is mandatory. There's no point building substandard stuff. If we do that, we're not solving the housing crisis, we're just postponing it for another generation to deal with. And we saw that with much of the stuff that was built in the 60s and 70s. We built tons of housing. We've done it before. We built a lot of housing in the 1960s. Not all of it was bad, but a lot of it was. And it's not to repudiate that mission, but you cannot skimp on quality, because it just means you're not solving anything, you're just delaying problems. So for me, that would always be the mandatory one. But I wouldn't put it in as adversarial a framework as a triangle. I don't necessarily think that we have to pick two, or we can only have one if you sacrifice the other. I said before, I don't think quality has to come at cost, but I think if you are building quality, and if you're doing it cheaply, that, in a sense, is efficient. And the more efficient we can be, the more homes we're going to create as well. So we have to get away from the idea that, as I said before, that quality is expensive. If you are building quality, it doesn't just mean things look good. It means you're building in a cost-effective manner, and it means we're building efficiently as well. So let's have all three.
Janet, would you like to pick up that first question about activists? Asia?
Oh, Jenna. Yes. Okay, so I think I would say that that's really not a local government thing, or a government thing, really. I think that's for developers and housing associations, or even local councils. Whoever's doing the doing, who's ever developing, needs to consult with the local community. And I'm just going to use an example. When a housing association decides that they want to do a big regeneration project, and they have to consult with residents, and it takes years, and they have to employ certain people. And guess what? That's a good thing, because and there's a ballot at the end of it, and people have to vote on it. So I would turn that around and say it's for developers or housing associations, or whatever vehicle is doing the building needs to consult with the local community and start it with a view that this is going to take years to get people on side, but we're in it for the long haul. And if I could just make a play too, because it kind of relates to this, but if developers, please stop saying that they're going to build beautiful green walls around their developments. It doesn't fix air quality, and it looks awful in a year. It just dies, and the local government has to normally pick up fixing it or undeading it. Please don't do it. It's awful, and it just irritates people. And same with play parks. Don't build another play park. It looks awful in a few years, and often developers just put the cheapest kind of equipment in they can find, and it just irritates people, and it irritates the local authority too, because then they have to pick up the maintenance for it. So stick with key principles, doing the contributions that people actually want, fixing the roads, fixing the schools, fixing the infrastructure that there's currently there, because there's nothing that irritates local government more than putting in new infrastructure than they have to maintain later on. But yeah, I would say that it's really for the developers and housing associations to get the local community on side.
Ben, just because you raised the point about the new homes bonus and potential carrots for local councils, do you want to pick up on that question about the council tax rebates?
Yeah, it's a very short answer. I'm very pro carrot.
Great. I was going to just next, yeah.
Yeah, you're not getting any new news from me.
So I think it's a very interesting idea, and I am pro carrot, and I am definitely interested in ways that you can incentivise people to accept development. I don't think that actually a discount on the council tax is quite the right way of going about it. I don't think it would work. I'm prepared to be convinced if someone can work up a policy paper and show it to me. Ultimately, it wouldn't be for me anyway, it would be for the Chancellor. I think that we have to look at this more in the round and think about what are the other barriers that people hate about development. And Aisha's talked very eloquently about, she's absolutely right, by the way, and these are universal. Anybody who is trying to get elected, I mean, even as a Member of Parliament, that is exactly that. They write to me saying, why aren't you opposing this? Not voting for you. And it's very, very difficult on that doorstep at that time. So we have to think much more smartly about that. And actually, some of the ways we can do that is through quite smart use of technology. We have a great department in our department, in the Department for Levelling Up, called PropTech Department. And we are working with a lot of really innovative businesses, actually, and really harnessing that. And some of these ideas and some of these systems and solutions are being used by councils now. There are specific solutions that councils are using to do exactly what you talked about, Janet, in terms of the community engagement, because obviously we all know that the people with the pitchforks are the ones that have got the time to turn up. They feel strongly, but you've then got the silent majority over there who actually really either don't care or are broadly in favour, but they don't bother to turn up because they're a bit frightened of the pitch. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Oh, God. Right. Sorry. They're a bit frightened of the pitchforks. So, yes. And with that Human League interlude, I've slightly lost my train of thought, but we do need to harness technology, and we are starting to do that. And I think that's got a much greater role to play in the future.
Superb ringtone. Can I take another 3 here, please? One at the front, you, sir, and then chap in glasses behind.
Thank you. My name's Darshan Sangha. I'm a district councillor from Epping Forest. I have a question I'm going to throw in the mix. Modular homes for the panel here, and what are your thoughts? They are being proposed as a quick fix solution, quality-wise, the British standards, and also low cost as well. So just be interested to know what your thoughts are. I know at Epping Forest, we certainly have been looking into that as well, and building some homes as well. Thank you.
Rika Wojcielewicz, I'm Head of Housing and Planning Policy for the National Federation of Builders. We're the largest housing trade federation for SME house builders. Great points, Ben. And yourself there, Aisha. It's set up to fail. If you look at the planning system, minor size definition, 1 to 10. Major is 10 and above, so SMEs get completely ignored straight off the bat. 7 to 10 construction apprentices trained by SMEs. No one talks about that. Section 106, still nationally searchable, was meant to be. That was abandoned. So the question is, how do we get government to actually emphasise the benefits of housing and of the best house builders rather than always the failures, which, if I'm honest, the last 2 years has been awful. It was really painful politically.
Cheers. Hi, my name's Sam Gascoigne. I'm the Chairman for Scrutiny of Place, which basically means housing in Basildon Council. So my question's kind of more directed at Rachel, but obviously I'll take from anybody. It's the no-fault eviction plan to scrap. And basically, I used to be a landlord, and one of the things that cost one of my friends very dearly was when he had an awful tenant. It took 2 years to finally evict them on the basis they wouldn't pay their rent. Legal appeal after legal appeal, and then in the end, he lost everything on the back of that. It was an absolute nightmare. And so what I'm hearing from now is a lot of landlords, or for example, people that inherit houses or have a second home for whatever particular reason, just simply don't rent them because they're terrified if they get a nightmare tenant in, they've got a 3-year legal battle on their hands to get rid of them. And my understanding is in London particularly, but across the country, this issue is basically massively shrinking our rental supply for housing. So I'm just wondering, and sort of the fail-safe was, we'll just do a no-fault eviction. I'll get my house back, no-fault eviction. If that then goes, my concern would be, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, that we will be in a situation where there'll be loads of empty houses in our country, but no one's willing to rent them out of terror and fear that there will be no way of actually evicting nightmare tenants. So that was just a thing there that I'd love to hear some thoughts on. Thank you.
I realise we're rapidly coming to the end, so what I might suggest is that each panellist has a go at tackling any part of those three questions and also giving your final remarks. So should we just start down at the end with Ike?
Yep, I'll take on the modular housing. I have no problem with modular housing. I think it can be great. It can be produced cheaply, efficiently. No problem with it ideologically. My only issue with it is, well, it's not an issue. I think it's best used if it can be customised to make sure that it doesn't look as if you have kind of a national porter cabin has been imposed across the country. If it can be customised to make sure that it can respect vernacular context, if it can look as if it's locally bred rather than kind of created in a machine or by a factory, then no problem with it at all. It can optimise modern methods of construction. There's volume savings that can be made too. I think it's an area of housing construction that as technology improves, we're going to have to, well, we should certainly face more of, and certainly I think it could be very useful in delivering the supply that we need. It can also, very briefly as well, help with custom build too. Being able to kind of customise or tailor your house in the same way you do with an IKEA catalogue, etc. And it seems kind of fanciful now, but that's the kind of expectation some people have, and why not? So I think it's a good way, potentially, as long as design quality, I'm going to bang on about that all the time, as long as design quality is maintained, and as long as kind of contextual interface with the local environment is maintained, I think can be a good solution.
Ben?
Yeah, big fan of MMC as well, and for all things that Ike said, won't repeat them. The challenge for me is to find a way of scaling it as a UK industry. And it's kind of a Scandinavian thing at the moment, and the industry we've got manufacturing footprint in the UK is small and impressive, and the quality is great, the design is fantastic, but we need to scale it so that we can actually support a massive opportunity for the UK. These are good jobs, these are construction jobs, but they're kind of high-tech engineering jobs as well. And it's clean, and it's inside, and it's in it's in a building. It's not even a factory that these things are constructed in. So it is a really good opportunity to get some good quality jobs in and be a real British success story. On the landlords thing. We absolutely need to make sure that we're looking after landlords. The main reason for this is that you can't solve the housing crisis by just dibbling in with bits and bobs. You need to look at everything, and that means that we need to recognise that you don't grow a homeowner overnight. People don't leave university and say, right, I've finished my degree now, so I'm going to buy a house. It just doesn't work like that. And actually, there's this progression that we need to be supporting at every level, right through from council housing to the private rented sector, to build to rent, to buy to let, to rent to buy, all shared ownership. All of these different types of tenure along the way need help. Because we need to recognise that nobody goes from zero to owning a house overnight.
Richard, final thoughts?
SME one for me. I think our SME sector is just about forgotten in our industry now. I think it's pretty shocking. Just everything is cost. The planning system, and then ultimately access to land and everything else. And I think there needs to be a radical change, radical thought. And if we don't do that, we're never ever going to get meeting any housing number targets, whatever they are. We're never going to get there because we can't rely upon the top 20 house builders in the country, and you can't rely upon the top 10 social housing landlords as well. We won't get there. We haven't got the capacity to do it. We need the SMEs, but you need a radical reform, and you know better than me what those reforms are, but people need to listen. Yeah, and I'm not sure you're being listened to.
Very quickly from me on that, access to finance for SME builders. Absolutely. Access to finance. For me, it's our interpretation of Basel III. It's a classic way that we've done this for so long in this country. We've taken these European regulations, put them into a UK law, and then gold-plated the hell out of them so that they don't work for us. I'd completely reinterpret the way that we're implementing Basel III so that small SME builders can actually access finance.
Asia, can I just jump to you with your final remarks?
Yeah, I'll just pick up the landlord issue. So I think we must do everything we can to keep good landlords in the market. I know the government did some legislation with rogue landlords, so hopefully tackling that aspect of it. But we need to do everything we can to ensure that those people aren't, getting out of the market, and it's just going to make it worse for local authorities struggling. One of the things that we didn't really touch on today, I've been spending time in a particular seaside town, might be a parliamentary seat coming up there. Anyways, I've been speaking to people, and there's a big issue with the high street, like there is across the country, in terms of shops closing down and just needing that regeneration of the high street. So I know that Michael Gove has announced new kind of reforms to make it easier, but I would like to see a lot more focus on how we can kind of regenerate, maybe derelict high streets with new housing and kind of put some life back into them. And I'll end up with that.
Minister, to send us away with optimism and enthusiasm.
Yes, I'm very happy to do that. Thank you very much. So can I just say to Anthony, yes, I am listening to your plea from SMEs, and I have had so many people come to see me in the department to make this point to me that I have started work on a specific SME and diversification strategy, because I do believe that it is wrong that our industry is dominated by these major house builders, and there's nothing wrong with them intrinsically. It's just the fact that we don't have that representation like other countries do, where we have this diversity. And actually, if we have that diversity, often people are much more accepting of a development in their area if it's the family business, if it's the local developer, if it's somebody building their own house. They can get behind that rather than, the kind of the major volume house builders, etc. Who, by the way, please don't take this as I'm having a go at them. I'm not. But I think we just need to get that balance right, and we haven't got it right at the moment. So if you will just allow me to say a few very specific things. First of all, we're looking at public sector land, how we can make that available for the small guys. Secondly, we're looking at what Homes England are doing, because what I hear is they're not working very well with SMEs and smaller builders. So I'm working with them to change the way that they have some of their funds operate, some of their grant. They've got quite a lot of money that they're dishing out, but it's very hard for the small guys to get hold of it. I'm looking very much at the way the planning regime works. We should, in my view, have a much more permission in principle system for smaller sites that the SME builders are going to be using. I would like to see that accelerated. I would like to see some of the restrictions on affordable housing lifted for those smaller sites if they're done by small builders, because that's the way we're just going to get more supply into the system overall. I want to, as I said already, I want to boost that community land trust aspect of the market. There's so many innovative models, including alms houses and some of these other things that I think we should really lean into. And finally, back to nutrients. We need to fix that, because that is much more detrimental to the smaller builders. So I am listening. I'm working on it. I want to see more announcements, and I'm making that case both to Michael and to the Chancellor on a very regular basis. Shall I put it that way?
Ladies and gentlemen, can I finish by saying thank you very much to Clarion for helping to put this event on. I'm afraid not. We're out of time, sir. Sorry about that. Come speak to me afterwards, sir. I'd love to talk to you about it.
Thank you.